Hello, my dear friends. How are you? I'm Arith, and welcome to the third part of this series. Today, I would like to touch on a subject which I find to be yet another important step concerning our craft and the interactions we slowly make step by step with the world that surrounds us and its persons. I thought about advancing into something a little bit more complex concerning the others, the entities we may encounter out there and the relationships we create with them, as well as trying to perceive them and get to be involved more deeply. However, I think that will stay for the next part because I think there's another step that should be at the very least taken into consideration to better prepare ourselves to really engage with entities, with the persons that are out there in the natural world and the potential allies we can make for the sake of the craft. Very recently, I have talked about building an intimate relationship with the land, getting to know the land and its persons, having intimacy with the environment, but I haven't quite explained what that means and how important it is, because the video in question wasn't about that. But before we start, sorry, allow me to give yet again, this time a little piece of perception, hopefully encouragement, but at the same time it may be discouraging for some, but I think it must be said. We have heard many people say, probably I included as well, that if I can do it, so can you, or something between those lines. I don't know what the people have in mind when they say this, but as for me, it was a truth for a very long time, because I don't particularly see myself as someone better than anyone else, or special for that matter. So if I can do something, why shouldn't anybody or everybody else do it too, right? But putting this in reverse is when I've realized that as much as we want to encourage people, the truth about the phrase, if I can do it, so can you, can have a very negative impact on people, and it is actually a lie that can very well destroy any enthusiasm and self-confidence. I don't know who you are, you don't know me, I don't know each person that is watching this. My only hope is to help someone, anyone, and hopefully by the end of this series someone will be able to take something from this. However, we must be rational, and there are many things in life that we can't do or are not able to do because of a great variety of circumstances. However, we can certainly do other things that other people can't, or they can't do it either. When we achieve something in life, there's a lot of factors behind that achievement and the struggle to get there. Some people struggle more than others, and some people don't even get the same chances as others. It can be due to economic circumstances, social status, the place and family they have been born into, country, society, religion. It also depends on our own progress as persons experiencing a variety of things in life and how that shapes our own being. The knowledge we gather, the group of friends or lack of friends, interactions, privileges, education and systems of education, and even luck itself and other factors of life that shape us, and therefore we achieve particular things in life according to a variety of circumstances, most of which are out of our control, and every factor in a person's life isn't the same as in another person's life, so we end up achieving different things. So when someone tells us, if I can do it, so can you, this may have a huge negative impact on a person who is trying to achieve the same as the other, because it depends very much on a variety of circumstances, and if those circumstances are not perfectly aligned and the same as the other individual, which is impossible, we won't achieve the same thing, or at the very least achieve something perhaps closer but not the same, and we will think that the problem is ours, that we are failing, we aren't doing enough, or that we are stupid, silly, complete fools, or not achieving something that we should, because if someone can do it, so can we. But that's not true, and it is a dangerous misconception, and I don't know what type of life you have and the things you have experienced, which is part of the reasons why I don't teach traditional folk magic, and instead I prefer to share and exchange experience. My experience can help you, and so can yours help me and help others. However, what I have achieved, I cannot fall into the misconception of telling you that you can achieve it too. Just the same way things you have achieved, I probably can't achieve them, because it depends on a variety of life circumstances and so many factors happening through the course of time that builds each individual differently in relation to their own experiences. So please do not feel bad about yourself for not achieving the things that here I speak. It isn't your fault, and you are certainly not an idiot or unintelligent. It's just the circumstances and factors of life each one of us has been through, which are quite different from one another. You will achieve something, and it is yours. And I think it is important to know this, because quite often people do not believe in witchcraft, magic, the supernatural, etc., because not only they do not believe in their own potential, but also because it won't happen to every person due to the circumstances, factors, and choices in their own lives that brought them to this very moment. Just because it doesn't happen to us or doesn't happen in the way others tell it, doesn't mean it is not real, and doesn't mean we are weak and incapable. Many different things happen to many different people, and we should share our experiences. Even if at the end of the day we are not capable of manifesting something that feels like magic, there's always something to learn. But I still believe that everyone has great potential in them, often unexplored, and often for lack of self-confidence, because we expect things to happen the same way others say it should. It's important to remember that we all experience a lot of things in life quite different than others, than other people. And many things we achieve in life are mostly due to a variety of different factors. No one is more or less than anybody else, but it is important to understand things don't work out for us the same way it works for another. More often than not, it is not our fault. sadly, not all of us have the same opportunities in life, and that very much depends on time, environment, society, cultural and family or familiar backgrounds, social, political and religious backgrounds, and events, historical circumstances, possessions, property, wealth, etc. This is one of the major reasons why I don't deal with hereditary cases concerning traditional folk magic or witchcraft. To begin with, because it is often quite presumptuous and not everyone has that luck, and in fact most people do not come from such a hereditary background and only say that they come from that background to legitimize it and put themselves on a pedestal. Furthermore, most hereditary cases of having magical power, potency and vital force have nothing to do with a right based on spiritual and or blood inheritance. But people have different opportunities in life and also privileges. And to finalize, hereditary cases in witchcraft do exist, mind you. There is indeed the rare case of inheritance of such power and vital force, but like everyone else, such people have to work on it or lose it. Besides, hereditary cases are also a factor out of people's control, so such a factor will already give someone a certain advantage in relation to others that were not so lucky. Therefore, the phrase, "if I can do it, so can you," is a mistaken belief. We all have great potential, but sadly a lot of people don't have the same luck and did not experience the same circumstances, therefore do not have the same access and the same success as others. If you do not achieve the same as someone else, do not be troubled and do not lose enthusiasm, because it isn't your fault. Keep trying. The potential lies in you, and there's still hope to experience certain circumstances in life and be in contact with some factors that may help you to achieve what you wish and are eager for. I wish you all best of luck. Now, let's get into it, my dear friends, shall we? If you please. All right, building an intimate relationship with land and its persons. As we progressively move towards the environment beyond our familiar space in an attempt to make allies and both inviting them in and let yourself be known to them for the sake of the craft, as we spoke in the previous video, I think, I think it is important to be more familiar with these environments and truly knowing the beings that in there inhabit and live, and only then can we create any type of relationships with such beings. In a way, it is almost the same thing as getting to know the environment where a people live and have their traditions, customs, their own folklore, as a big part of their own identity is shaped according to the place they inhabit and have been born into. Although not everyone is ready or even wants to make connections, but we only get to know it through a careful and respectful approach. So, from personal experience, of course, physical intimacy with a place augments the chances of successfully finding and creating an important, strong and fruitful relationship with an entity we often perceive as a spirit. Many societies in this modern world, including my own, have stopped being indigenous for a very long time, unfortunately. There's been quite the successful destruction of our indigenous past and way of thinking, starting with the removal of people's intimate relationships with land and its persons. This disconnectedness between most of us and the land we inhabit has led us to a deep sense of depression, and most of our goals in life are towards things that further distance us from nature, resulting in a perpetual hunger for something more. And so, and no matter how much we achieve, it always feels that it isn't enough. We still feel empty and we cannot quite put an end to this spiritual starvation. And as I said on a previous video about pagan temples, Some of us are lucky to still live in the same ancestral land of our ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years, and others are not so lucky, unfortunately. Even though for someone or some people like myself, we have a close contact with the sacred sites and ancestral structures of our ancestors, there's almost the same spiritual hunger as in those who live somewhere else far from the land of their ancestors. Which is why I do not believe that being close to and in contact with ancient structures and places that were once understood to be sacred truly makes an actual difference and change in us, in spiritual terms at least, in the sense of truly being connected to the land and its persons. We may get to visit a dolmen, sleep in it, or sleep on top of a burial mound, lie down on the floor of sacred ground, but unless we understand the importance of such a place and why it was understood to be sacred, it doesn't truly make us more knowledgeable and more connected with vital force. It's not the place per se that creates any meaningful spiritual change. It is what lies deep within that which is often unseen. We usually only get attached to the superficial, which are the things that can be immediately perceived, and we forget to look and feel the realms that exist within. We forget to make the effort to understand what human persons of the past felt in those places and what sentiments are and sensitivity has led them to understand such places as holy or sacred or with some spiritual importance or potency. Physical intimacy with the land not only is something we often forget, but it is something we don't even care about, because more often than not we perceive the spiritual as something unreachable by our physical presence, as something that can only be felt through consciousness. But in my experience, that is not so. We are physical spiritual beings. We live on this land and we get real physical experiences from the land, just like other beings that live here. The spiritual experience cannot be dissociated from the physical experience. The impulses of trying to experience life only through the mind is something brought on by more recent religious understandings, mainly and in great part by Christendom, especially through colonization. It is this need to separate persons from the land they inhabit, losing physical intimacy with the land, therefore losing identity and losing connection with the spiritual of the land. As I said, it is not the ancient temples, megalithic structures and ideas of sacred grounds that truly gives us a spiritual change. It is the knowledge of the land on which such structures and notions were built upon. There was a time our ancestors had not yet built any structure to mark the place as holy or sacred grounds, and there was a time in which a physical space did not have attached to it yet any human notions of sacredness. The land was there nonetheless, but humanity had not yet been in contact with it yet. When they did, they found something. They felt something. They were acquainted with something. And that's when humanity marked the spots as holy or sacred grounds or as places strong in vital force. We look at the landscape and we immediately assume a place to be sacred or charged with vital force because we see an ancient religious structure. But what if the place is no longer charged with such vital force? And even if it is, for what purpose is such an idea if we don't know how to connect with it? We have to try to perceive this not only from an indigenous and animistic mindset, but also trying to see past space and time and transport our mind to the land before it was marked by human notions of sacredness. For all we know, there are a lot of places that are charged with vital force and quite strong and filled with spirit beings, but we pay no heed. because they are not marked by ancient religious structures. This is where physical intimacy with the land comes in, to get to know the land and its persons, feel the land below our feet, as it were. Doesn't matter where we are and if we are far from our ancestral home. I think what is important is to get to know the land we are at and build an intimate relationship with the land in order to be more immersed in the multidiversity and spiritual realms and existences in place. I am not denying the importance of being in contact with ancestral land and living and growing on ancestral land. What I'm saying is that due to several circumstances of life, we are either not in contact with ancestral land or we forgot what it means and the importance the land itself has on our own physical, mental, and spiritual existence. At this very moment, I am on my ancestors' lands. As a matter of fact, I am in the grounds where my ancestors have lived for hundreds of thousands of years. It has a deep meaning for me. The forests, the pines and firs and the several types of oaks, and the mountains nearby, and the rivers and the very whispers of the wind. But how much of this familiar feeling is truly spiritual or simply superficial? I have to know the land. I have to build intimate relationships with the land. And I have found other places equally important to me, without ever having any preconceived notions of place and land and its persons. The more I got to build an intimate relationship with places, the more knowledge I have gathered and also strong relationships with place and persons. I do hope you take my meaning, because I'm truly not denying the importance of being in contact with ancestral land and ancient sacred sites, because those are obviously important for the culture and identity of a people. What I'm saying is that quite often we miss a lot of opportunities to spiritually grow because we don't care about land and persons outside what we think we know. And for our own spiritual growth and our craft, it is important to have physical intimacy with the land, because it is from such a land that we draw what we need to be successful in our magical endeavors. We are not alone. It's not just the materials, but also the allies we have, and the vital force we need, and the flow of connections between spirits. So I think it is important to address this before we actually start to even speak of other entities we may encounter out there. Look at my stuff. It belonged to my great-grandfather and it has come down to me. It is important to me on a sentimental level. But does it contain any power in it? Any vital force? Anything that is useful for the craft and on a spiritual level? Perhaps. But how do I know? The sentimental importance is superficial, no less important, but superficial. I need to be acquainted with the object itself and try to perceive what lies within, if there's anything at all. This stuff alone has no use to me except for aiding me when walking on specific soils. But if I can truly build intimacy with it, perhaps I may find that there's power within still, part of a person's vital force, which may aid me on other levels of my existence. And I don't necessarily only focus on on a mental level, but simply acknowledge the real physical existence of this stuff and building a real physical relationship with it. I am experiencing it on a physical level, which is no less spiritual, because we are physical beings on a physical space which is charged with spiritual or vital force, or energy, or whatever you want to call it, magic. In my own experience, I don't think we should forget about our physical experiences. Just the same way a mind experience, a soul experience, and even a subconscious experience is important to us, and it is reflected upon the physical. so does the physical reflects upon the mental and spiritual. We, as physical beings, are very much experiencing the spiritual from this physical perspective. And I think we ought to understand this perception, because other beings experience the physical and the spiritual according to their own existing conditions. Our existing condition is different from the existing conditions of many others, but we are all experiencing one another. The more we understand the experiences of a given existing condition, the better we can perceive how others experience life and how they experience the environment and its persons. A spirit being may manifest itself to us in the way it knows how, and we perceive it from the point of view of our own existing condition. Such a spirit being will perceive us differently according to their own existing condition. When people say they see a ghost, it may not be a ghost as we normally perceive some sort of manifestation of a dead person, but a being, a person manifesting itself naturally under their own existing condition. But we just perceive it differently than it is due to our own existing condition. So maybe their own perception of us is also ghostly-like, because they cannot perceive us the way we perceive ourselves, but rather perceiving us under their own existing condition. It is this physical intimacy that is needed to better perceive what we normally understand to be the unseen. It is truly unseen if we do not do the effort to understand and get to know and be intimately connected with such persons of the land, be those other than human or more than human persons. Entities we usually label as spirits. The more we build an intimate relationship with land and persons, the more we perceive and the more we understand that we were unable to perceive some things because we were forcing ourselves to experience things solely from a mental level and not including our existing condition, which is a condition that also has limitations on others' perceptions. Physical intimacy helps to break some limitations of perception, because through physical intimacy we are very much creating an active interaction with the land and its persons. And we get to know them and they get to know us. How do we do this? Well, I cannot tell you. Perhaps for the same reasons a psychologist doesn't tell their patients what to do, I think, because it robs people of their freedom, autonomy, and capacity to solve and experience things for themselves. I mean, the tools are given, I suppose, and then people achieve what they have to achieve by themselves. No one can make you see it and experience it. Otherwise, it is meaningless. To be attentive to local folklore, myths, culture, history, these are important ways to get to know the land, especially when it comes to folklore, because it encompasses a great amount of people's cognitive perception towards the landscape they inhabit. Several experiences remain in folklore, in people's attitudes and behavioral patterns, and that includes the very spiritual experiences they have with the land, especially the type of folklore that deals with experiences through physical interaction with the land. If even human persons have remembered it, the land itself doesn't forget. I remember my great-grandmother telling me things like, for instance, when there was at our doorstep an element from nature, be that a dead animal, part of a dead animal, a flower, a specific branch with curious shape, a beautiful and unique stone, she would say that it was a gift from the fairies. Despite she being an awful woman, she was quite powerful when it came to traditional folk magic, as I would come to realize years later. She had a powerful connection with the land and much much of the folklore would reveal what seems to have been ways to interact with the land and its persons. And so it remained in the vocabulary and in certain attitudes towards the land. It remained in the folk traditions, fairy tales, myths, legends, the human cognitive structure that ties people to the land for thousands of generations, like the whispers of the dead who still speak to us because they were somehow been transformed and reborn into spirits of the land through death. The stories of the land we live upon must be known. All of it, including the darker aspects of it, the struggles, the murders, the pain and suffering, and yes, for those living on stolen land or land taken by force or land that was given through dishonorable actions, it is an act of respect for the land and its peoples to know the history of hardships and survival, of torment and anguish. The struggles of persons of the land are reflected on the land itself and on the others that in there inhabit. The land itself does not forget. And such manifestations of great struggle and pain leave deep marks that in turn the land itself expresses outwards and inwards, changing the consciousness of its inhabitants. And this too has an impact on the ways we try to connect with each other. And one of the reasons why sometimes it is so hard to try to pierce the barrier of mistrust, because deep in its roots lies the fear of being hurt again. As I said many times before, death is the absence of vital force, and when a land has had more death than anything else, we can truly sense a deep void, the same emptiness we feel face to face with a recent dead person. It is disturbing. It is important to be acquainted with the struggles of the land if we strive to help restore vital force. Death is by no means the end, but it must not endure either or overlap life, otherwise the land will be completely devoid of vital force to the point that there is no turning back. Anyway, knowing the place so we can know its persons will save us a lot of trouble and also save us, you and me, from disappointment and even loss of enthusiasm. If we immediately try to know the persons of the land, we won't understand a lot of situations and behaviors, and it turns out to be rather difficult to build relationships from that point onwards. Whilst knowing the background and the very land that is part of the identity of the whole gives you important knowledge that you can use to better communicate with the land and its persons. Departing from a point where you already have some knowledge that aids in your attempt to connect with whatever and whoever. Building physical intimacy with the land reports us back to what was told in the previous video, the second part of this series, I think, which is how the spirits perceive you and what you let them know of you. The way you interact with place will help them to get to know you and either approach you or be willing to be approached, or at the very least be less likely to run away from you. What we are attempting here is solely on an individual level. It is between you and the land. It is not an interaction with other persons at first. It is solely about your person and your experience and interaction with the land. You are solely making yourself part of it. You are inserting yourself in order to belong. Doesn't matter the opinions of other people, other human persons, and what are their political inclinations and their own moral values, and what they think it is appropriate or not, especially their own ideas of what they think it is appropriate on behalf of others they have no contact with. The land itself will let you know if you are welcomed or not, or when you are welcomed, if you are welcomed at all. This is a long process that requires patience, kindness, respect towards the land. Again, it is between you and the land. Other human persons may think you do not have the right to create a strong connection with the land, but the land itself often disagrees. The land doesn't understand the political and moral backgrounds of the society of human persons. The land sees human persons as persons of the land. Your connection or disconnection with the land comes through you and through the land. And the intimate relationships you create with the land or not. You do not own the land. No one owns the land. It's like loving someone. You cannot stop love and you cannot choose who you love, and no one has the right to choose love for you or to prohibit love. Attempts are made, surely, but we love whom we love. It is about connection, intimate relationship. This is not about what other human persons think of you, but what the spirits think of you, and they rarely perceive human persons the same way we perceive human persons such as ourselves. Their perception of you is as complex as our human perception towards them. You don't have to take my word for it. Obviously not. Good gods, no. Find for yourself. I do not speak for anyone. I speak only from personal experience, nothing more. I may be wrong in a lot of things, of course, obviously, and from time to time I perceive that I was wrong in something or in some approach, and it is necessary to rectify and try again. But I don't know how else to say it, because what happens and what I have experienced, I cannot deny that to myself, just to fit into the minds of whatever people wish to be real and whatever people think it is right and wrong. Our own experiences cannot be shaped to fit into other people's own perceptions of reality. We experience what we experience, and that is our own reality. I think one of the biggest problems we are facing here, and it needs to be deconstructed, is the fact that we are socially conditioned to a type of human thought towards the way we tend to perceive the world. And one of the main objectives of building an intimate physical relationship with the land is precisely to step out of conditioned human thought and step into the land to know its identity. Not to know the identity given to the land by human conditioned thought, but to truly know the identity of the land, its own identity, how it expresses itself. And then the same process will go towards the entities we often call spirits. It's not about the identity of human conditioned thoughts. Our human conditioned thought has created towards the others, but the identity that they truly have. Because we often judge their non-existence based on our failure to understand and perceive them, precisely because of our preconceived conditioned thoughts. Yet they exist nonetheless, regardless of what we think of them or whatever identities we give to them. It's not about you and it's not about other human beings, it's about the land and its persons. And giving the opportunity to them to express their identities as they are, and not as we have made them in our minds. This is a sort of mind process that needs to be worked on when we step into the outside. It is a very difficult process, and I'm not here by any means telling you that I have been extremely successful. Such as yourself, I am a human person living in a human society, so it is hard to divide our perception according to each reality. It's a work in progress, but I believe it must be done, and we have to continue to do that effort. I am not indigenous, and the last time any of my ancestors were indigenous, or at the very least still with a strong animistic mind and with a strong intimate connections to the land and its persons, was about more or less 1,500 years ago, perhaps. But I personally would like to return to that mindset. I doubt very much that I will ever get to transform my mind in such a way that I can truly interiorize and perceive the world through an indigenous mindset in my lifetime, but I want to do that effort for the sake of the next generations to come. There's an open window again that is giving us the chance, the opportunity to become indigenous again in the future. And I don't want to accept just yet that it is only a romantic idealism. But this is a very personal wish that should not be taken into consideration here in your own attempts and endeavors in your own craft. It's not about what others wish, but instead to understand the true identity of the land. Whatever means are used, I think it is important to always keep in mind that this part of our effort isn't truly about us. It's about allowing the land to express itself towards us. And for that, we must show the land who we are, our intentions, and that we are respectfully present to listen. Let's put it simple. In the world of humans, we often work with the outside. When it comes to magic, we work from the inside into the outside. It's not just an inner work on our own person, because that too is necessary in every social environment, but it is in great part working with the realities that lie within the landscape. We are not just dealing with the tree concerning its physical existence, but also what lies within. Know the deep identity that flows through its roots. Anyway, in part, these little series are also my personal journal, because I will want to remember it again someday. I think we must also not forget that since this is a type of work between realms, we have to be careful to not bring a certain mental state into each environment. The morals and laws of human societies do not work in the realm of spirits. I wouldn't say it is upside down, but it is just different in many aspects. Some things that make sense to us as humans within a human society make absolutely no sense in the realm of spirits, just as the same way we have to be careful not to bring back a mental state when we step again into our social environment in the realm of humans. I could obviously repeat what we hear so many times, that we have to be careful not to mix things up and forget how to live our own life in this existence, and to be careful not to bring our own socially conditioned human thoughts into other existences. But it is not that easy. In the long run, I think this is something you will end up being more worried about, I think. At least this is something that worries me, and I have to constantly remind myself of this. This work, our craft, may start off as an escapism, but it truly isn't that when we get to go deeper. It becomes a responsibility. Sometimes it is extremely hard to go back to whichever realms of existence. Let me give you an example. And mind you that this is quite hard for me to expose and to explain. When I am with a friend, a human person, a very close friend, there are moments that I feel like I'm drifting away, slowly being carried away, like floating on the surface of the ocean, and it is taking me into another place. I zone out. Sometimes I completely shut down, or there is a thin layer in front of me, like a wave of glass that passes through me, and then I know I'm not totally there, and I start to see different things, and I'm in different places. My closest friends have noticed this, and it is hard to be totally here, and at the same time you are not totally there either, wherever. This compromises the relationships you have been creating. Persons, be those human or otherwise, especially the closest to you, may understand the situation, obviously, but it is also understandable that they start to back away from you, because you are both in so many places at once, and you are in neither two. This ends up messing with your head, and not only it is frustrating, but it is also energy consuming. Not only you become extremely tired, but also desperate, because you aren't doing anything actually. You are just in a limbo, sort of, having wonderful experiences, certainly, but that's not living. I'm not the best person to tell you this, but indeed we need to be able to focus and learn how to focus and learn that there is time, space, and place for everything. If we stay too long in this limbo, we destroy ourselves and nothing is accomplished. And there's a great chance to also have a negative impact on those who care about us, those who love us. I often lose control. Quite frankly, I still don't have the discipline and strength to step outside and inside at will. So I think you should know that, especially if you are taking the first steps or somehow dealing or doing it all over again from scratch. Discipline your mind in the very beginning, because later on it will be very hard and there's a great risk to permanently get stuck, because things can get very confusing and sometimes it is hard to perceive where you actually are and who is truly there. One way to protect ourselves from this is to make sure the mental state we use for each realm isn't brought to another realm where it isn't needed. It's like being an actor, I suppose. You play the part when and where it is needed, and don't bring it back home. This sounds like having multiple identities, but it is not quite, because you are in control and you have to keep having control. I would not bring winter clothing to a summer vacation by the lake, nor would I bring my sexy swim shorts to climb a mountain in winter. I just really hope you thrive in this. When we enter in these realms, we are shedding our humanity. We leave behind our human condition. We have to shape our thought and behavior according to the environment we experience, because we need to blend in and become part of it, forging the identity that is used to better communicate. We become the other. But this other doesn't thrive in the social environments of human persons. We have to try to avoid the influences that each environment has upon our identity. We must learn how to shift between the identities that are best suited in each environment. There are many challenges, and it is important to stay firm and know what to do, and keep your wits about you, if the aim is indeed to keep going ever deeper. There's plenty of physical and mental situations and chances and changes of moods that can easily discourage us, to make us quickly lose confidence and enthusiasm, leading to an unhealthy skepticism. That will probably happen at moments in your life. It is happening right now to many people who are seeking to find something more other than their own physical day-to-day reality. Ups and downs, which sometimes we move towards belief and then back again to disbelief. And we keep trying because we want to believe. We hunger for something more, and we are not quite certain what it is. But it feels like there's something in the air, hovering. And it is right there. But somehow we can't quite catch it, leaving us starving for a force that can only be determined as magic, but it seems out of range all the time, even though it is in the same place as always, like being thirsty near a source of pure and clean fresh water, but there is a thick mist, and we desiccate because we lost the ability to move forward towards the unknown. We must not give up, especially when it is too hard or it is frightening. I hope this series encourages you in the darkest moments. As I said before, it is about the effort to intimately know the land. If we are to build relationships with the persons of the land with which we will form strong connections and make allies for our craft, we must also know their stories, the deep history of struggle and emotions and living experiences of the beings we are trying to create contact with. We are to learn the history of these beings, be those spirits, the dead, the ancestors, and other than human persons, because it is the story of the land itself, which in several moments has been intertwined with ours. It is to either re-establish or establish interconnectedness. This is how we learn to, or relearn, how to contact with the land once more. But perhaps more importantly, how we learn how to belong to a land. In our current social systems, most of us, have lived so detached from the land that we are like aliens walking on a foreign planet we have recently found. More often than not, we humans have placed ourselves on a particular group of persons apart from everything else, with a fixed notion of superior rationality. Knowing the history of the land is knowing our history, our forgotten past, and the past of our ancestors, and the past of the spirits. They have not been separated from the land. We were the ones that have stepped out. In a way, perhaps a dangerous way, we must forget to be human, forget about the conceptions that form the fixed model of what a human is and what it means to another human, and in the human's eyes. We become the other, the person that lives with the land and not on the land. We must find ways to do this. Each one of us will find ways to achieve this, and it must be shared. When we become the other, we no longer perceive what a human is within a human society, but instead see ourselves reflected on the spirit entities we encounter. It is a reflection on a mirror that before was veiled by the cloak of humanness. As we progressively become the other, we are integrated in the land and in the communities of the non-human entities. We do not enter as humans. We do the effort to forget we are humans. We do not enter with our mind full of human thoughts. We stop thinking as humans, and instead we move forward with our bones alone. Remember that, please. If you take anything from this, may it then be to become the other, as if you belong to the land, not as a human and not with the sense of superiority typically of a human person that perceives the world as a place to be exploited and serve one's needs and making everything about ourselves, but instead you shapeshift into the other, a creature of the land, a spirit of the land, and all your humanness is left behind when you enter. You walk with your bones, and then it is no longer a question of believing. We do not need belief when we already know it is real. Afterwards, it is possible to know the populations of other than human persons and to map out the places and where vital force is stronger, which are the hostile and safe environments, the passages to other places and pathways to specific realms and the homes of your allies and other auxiliary entities and so on and so forth. You will map out the environment you are working from and visit the places you need to visit as often as you need. Put the offerings in the right places to the right folk and to be at the appropriate places for each of the works within your craft. But before all of that, there's plenty of work to be done. Walk with your bones. Now, this one has come to an end. I don't know exactly what I shall speak of in the next video of this series. It also depends very much on what you are interested in. I'm trying to follow my own experience from a particular point of sort of initiation towards something more complex, right? I think the next video will be more complex, and I will try to explain the others from my own experience. Certainly, we all have different experiences and perceive things differently, so I would very much like to learn about your own experiences. If you can, please do share it in the comments so we can all learn with each other and share information and find common grounds, because I think that will help us to better broaden our perception of these things and the best approaches to continue on thriving, improving, and growing in this path. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, thank you for today. Until we meet again, my dear friends.